Hello, my name is Priyanka Babbar, and today I will be sharing a presentation on my research proposal regarding women in transit. In this presentation, I will go through a quick background on public transit in general and women's use of it, followed by my research objectives, findings from literature review, methods to be used, limitations, expected outcomes, and relevance of my proposed research. When we think about why cities have public transit, what do we think? Some of us say it's a way to provide low cost travel, others think it's a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and for some, it's just a better option than walking. Now, although these things are relevant, a key part of why public transit is provided and heavily subsidized by municipalities is because it increases accessibility for its customers. Being able to access healthcare, education, or employment all create healthier, more productive patrons. So, if we view transit as an equalizer, helping people reach their travel needs and be more productive in society, we also have to see what data transit agencies are using to plan their systems and take a critical lens to assess how equal the system really is. Women are a key demographic of transit users. Women, in fact, have a higher reliability on transit because they are less likely to have a driver's license and tend to have lower car priority within their household. This lower priority can take the form in women planning their trips based on the availability of the car in the household, or not taking trips at all if it's not convenient. Women are also less likely than men to be employed and more likely to be low income. Therefore, affordable travel, such as transit, is a key method of transportation. Women also have a distinct set of travel needs. Common features include multi stop trips, midday trips, caregiving related trips, traveling with large or heavy loads, and/or traveling with dependents. These needs do not fit within the mold of the common 9 to 5 commuter trip that our transit services are currently based upon. So, to improve women's accessibility and increase ridership, there needs to be better understanding of how they travel, why they travel, and also how this information can be implemented into planning practice. The general method to understand the population's travel behavior is through the use of surveys. Surveys allow for a large number of respondents and is a less time consuming form of data collection as compared to interviews or travel diaries. Surveys, though, are not only limited to transit, but national surveys such as the Household Travel Survey ask about timing, reason, and mode of travel more generally. These surveys are a key point of information for transit agencies and planners to analyze and make decisions regarding changes to transport networks. So, because of women's greater dependency on transit and unique set of travel behaviors, it brought to my interest how gender plays into transit planning. That is why the objective of my research is to identify gender biases that exist in Canadian travel behavior surveys, and to further analyze how methods of data collection and analysis perpetuate inequalities for female transit users. The analysis will work to identify what are common forms of gender bias in Canadian household travel surveys, as seen in the lines of questioning and presentation of findings, and what, if any, pre existing data can be disaggregated to reveal more about women's travel behavior and preferences. These research questions will work to identify the root causes of inequitable planning, as bias can enter the research process at multiple stages. So, from a scan of the literature, it seems that bias in transport research has been identified. However, the sources of bias are typically seen as non representative sampling, time lags between survey execution and sample selection, lack of response from participants, underreporting of trips, and inaccuracies given by the respondent or coded by the survey administrator. So, to account for these biases, a shift has arisen towards quantitative recording of travel behavior via big data. This can be using smart card data, GPS, smartphone tracking, and although these lead to mass amounts of information, when we use these methods, the data is analyzed independent of the user, and therefore important demographics are not linked to the travel behavior. So, progress towards big data actually reinforces gender blind information collection. And when data does not take into account gender, there's a long history across academic disciplines to treat men as the default and women as the atypical, leading to bias being intertwined into our systems. Transit research regarding women in recent years have been working towards reducing harassment and sexual assault. Almost 4,000 incidents of sexual assault or harassment were recorded on Canada's 22 largest systems between 2013 and 2017. of which 90% were perpetrated against women by men. Violence against women contribute to the pink tax on transportation, where women are forced to choose between safer, more expensive forms of travel, like rideshare or taxi, and public transit. Although safety and security should be a priority when discussing women's transportation, a large aspect of women's travel behavior is missed when things such as women's greater dependency on transit, due to lack of car priority, lower possession of driver's license, greater likelihood of low income or unemployment, is not addressed. And when we don't account for the specific set of women's travel needs, such as multi stop trips, midday trips, or caregiving related trips. To understand the area in which gender bias encroaches on transportation planning, both stages, data collection and data analysis, must be examined. This is best done by a mixed method approach, where qualitative measures of content analysis is initially done, followed by quantitative measures of data disaggregation. A content analysis of the questions and published findings from 10 Canadian cities' household travel survey will be analyzed using a gender based lens to see how women are represented in statistics and if there is any evidence of women centered questions being in the surveys. The 10 highest populated cities in Canada are selected because larger cities tend to have robust transit systems and also set the tone for transit research best practices. The findings from the qualitative analysis will then be used to provide recommendations to the cities on how to be both more informative and more inclusive. And the results will also guide the data analysis of the case study of Edmonton, Alberta, which commences in phase 2 of the research. Using the coded responses from Edmonton's household travel survey, I will conduct a gender based analysis. With the survey results, a series of inferential statistics will be conducted on Microsoft Excel to not only disaggregate single categories by gender, but to also cross examine variables such as age, income, and race with gender. This will be done to show how the data transit agencies collect are not being used to their full potential, and by disaggregation, more can potentially be revealed about women's travel behavior. Although this proposal is working towards building equality for women, this includes all female presenting peoples and an acknowledgement that gender does not exist on a binary. So, a motive behind this research is that we cannot change what we are not aware of, and once we are aware, we cannot help but change. This analysis is limited to women as they have a known set of travel behaviors that differ from men, which historically has not been accounted for in an equitable fashion. And so, seeing those differences and applying it to planning practice is necessary. But the analysis of women as one group is not intended to take away from the lived experience of BIPOC, disabled, migrant, or LGBTQIA+ women who individually have varying travel needs. The study is to further the ideology that transit planning should be done to accommodate and fulfill the needs of all riders with consideration of, not regardless of, their gender, age, income, race, or ability. Other limitations of this research follow the second portion of the study. As gaining access to multiple municipality survey responses is unfeasible, the span of data analysis is confined to Edmonton, Alberta. And with that, the analysis is also contingent on Edmonton's household travel survey containing areas of gender bias that can be further disaggregated. Lastly, this analysis is limited in the form of gender bias it will identify. The study is limited to bias against women and will not incorporate disaggregation of those who identify as other or non binary on travel surveys. Despite these limitations, with this study, I will be able to identify common biases in transit data collection through the content analysis and disaggregating pre existing data by gender. The finding from these analyses will then be used to provide recommendations on how municipalities can learn from each other in terms of presentation and analysis of their household travel survey, and overall contribute to the literature on how women are incorporated into transit research. Overall, this research is relevant to women's everyday uses of transit, and with the growth of gender based analysis within transit planning, it can lead to an overall more equitable and efficient system that will in turn increase ridership, which has subsequent positive effects on municipalities' GHG emissions, road congestion, and collection of fares. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would want to speak more on this topic.